top epidemiologists in the country, so he tracks disease. He's an associate professor in health sciences at the University of Ottawa. Dr. Deonandan, as always, thank you for staying up late. I know it's a little after 11:30 where you are on the eve of Canada Day. Thank you so much for doing this.
It's my pleasure.
So in British Columbia, we don't have the exact number yet, but it appears that hundreds have passed suddenly, mostly elderly living alone because of heat. And it appears that we've got dozens in other provinces, including Alberta and Saskatchewan. And it's not even July yet. Where you are, it'll be July in a few minutes. But can you just help us out here and help us understand? I know you're not a meteorologist or an environmentalist or a climate scientist. I get all that, but you're a doctor. We're not even into July yet. Is this going to be a miserable summer?
It might be, in some respects. I mean, heat waves have been increasing across the world in the last few years due to climate change effects. In some parts of Asia, like India and Pakistan, heat wave deaths are now annually and quite common. And it's been increasing because of climate change and because of our built environments. So the more urban environments, the more concrete we have, fewer trees, less grass, we have a lesser tolerance and lesser ability for the built environment to absorb heat. Then we have people living in crowded tenements and so forth. So a combination of climate change, lesser resilience amongst people, we are older and more frail, and our built urban environments being less amenable to resilience against this kind of weather change makes for a dire predicament. This summer, I can't make predictions, but over the course of the next few years, I'm afraid that this might be more and more common.
Is it just people who are indoors? I just get the impression that some people really have no idea how vulnerable they are. They could be outdoors and make the mistake of jogging or playing some sort of sport and keel over. But I don't want to overdo this thing. You're the doctor. That's why I've got you there.
Yeah, well, first, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a scientist, but I have studied climate change effects globally. And we have to be careful, of course, especially if you're older, if you have a predilection towards respiratory diseases. It's not just the heat, but the heat does affect breathing conditions, air quality. If there's a high pollution day, then you're more likely to have asthmatic effects in events like that. So I recommend that people look for the symptoms. These include nausea, confusion, hotness and redness on their skin, headache, losing consciousness, obviously. And if these symptoms do arise, of course, seek help. Call 911 if you have to. But we shouldn't be overexerting ourselves. Stay indoors. If you're feeling the heat, stay in a cool situation. Stay wet if you can. There are a variety of strategies that the experts are advising.
So what parts of the body, like which organs are most vulnerable when it's really, really too hot for comfort?
Well, it will affect your breathing, it'll affect your cardiovascular system, and it does seem to have an overall systemic effect on cognition as well. So we're talking here about lungs, the heart, and the brain. But I mean, extending beyond my expertise here, but this is what I've observed, and this is what I perceive in the symptomatic literature.
No, I get it. You're not a medical doctor. You are a scientist, and you certainly have studied the science of the human body. So I'm trying to bend over backwards to understand how we can lose this many people, and I'm just wondering.
Yeah, it's a good question.
When a person is suffering, in the cognitive area, okay, they're just not able to be 100% rational, okay, because their mind, their brain is being affected. Is it possible that they don't even know that they're suffering? Yes, they're feeling hot, but is it possible that they don't know that beyond discomfort, there's something else going on?
That is entirely possible. Absolutely. It's kind of like when you go for a really long run sometimes and you overdo it, and suddenly your heart starts palpitating and you get a little confused and maybe you want to lie down. You're not entirely sure what's going on sometimes. Overexertion sometimes resembles heat exhaustion. So the cognitive effects may be the results of the circulatory system not functioning properly, may be the results of just simple overexertion, maybe the result of dehydration. A lot of things are happening here. So I think what we have to keep in mind, though, just be on the lookout for symptoms. It's kind of like when you haven't drunk enough water. You don't know you're thirsty until you're well into dehydration very often. That's why we recommend that we keep on drinking when we're exerting ourselves. It's kind of similar.
Dr. Deonandan, let me make this a little bit personal. If you had a mom and she was living alone, or a dad, they're living alone and they're elderly, would you go out of your way to make sure that they had air conditioning?
I would, if that was in my power to do so. I understand that some people are economically restricted in that potential, but a fan, if you can't afford air conditioning, is good. If you can't afford that, keeping wet, wearing wet clothing, staying in the shade is useful. Not exerting yourself, not moving around too much, that's important as well. But yeah, I would certainly be looking into my elder loved ones to make sure they had the supports they needed. And of course, as we know, the elderly are more susceptible to the effects of any extreme weather event.
So the Premier of the BC got into some trouble yesterday with a remark that wasn't, careful, and it wasn't planned, having to do with what the public services were doing or not doing to prevent people from getting sick and dying. And he made the statement about how Dr. Henry says that fatalities can happen. That's part of life, and it just came across as giving people the back of his hand. It sounded a little bit on the crude side. He tried to clean that up. But let me focus on the premise of the question that he got. In your opinion, are Canadian emergency services right now not equipped for the impacts of climate change?
I think that's an accurate assessment. We have, we're equipped for certain small amounts of emergency. We're better equipped for, extreme cold events than extreme heat events because we live in a cold weather country. We have large devices ready to go to dig us out of deep snowfall, especially where I live. But no jurisdiction in the world is sufficiently equipped to handle the true impacts of climate change that are coming our way, frankly. Right now we're seeing frequent hurricanes and cyclones happening at a frequency much more so than a couple of decades ago. Who's equipped for that? We've seen economic projections of the west coast of the USA looking at things like the costs of managing wildfires, the costs of managing the decrease in economic output and so forth being untenable due directly to climate change. Looking strictly at the healthcare system, we have no idea how to manage the potential rise in change in vector disease transmission as mosquitoes change their behavior, for example, or the change in crop production that's going to change your nutritional profile. So there are a variety of things we are not fully prepared for. We do a lot of planning for sub-Saharan Africa and places like that. And by the way, they aren't prepared either. We think about climate change as affecting those places more so. It's going to affect us. And we have to wake up to that reality.
Just before we move on to something completely different that gets closer to the pandemic and getting out of the pandemic, and specifically AstraZeneca, and more specifically what the Europeans are doing, before we do all of that, as far as emergency services are concerned, during the pandemic, so many of the rules that were in place were in service of making sure our healthcare system didn't collapse. We didn't have an unlimited amount of beds. We didn't have an unlimited amount of ventilators. And so we tried, different governments, provincial and federal, some were doing better than others, tried to make sure that the system wasn't overwhelmed. Are you worried that climate change will overwhelm our healthcare system?
It's a good question. And frankly, I hadn't thought of it in those terms before. I've been worried about climate change overwhelming our other pillars of civilization. But healthcare, absolutely. And this is a wake-up call. I mean, the pandemic was a bit of a wake-up call as well about our ability to stomach a perturbation in our way of life, our ability to navigate the tensions between science acceptance and science denial. And hopefully we have that wake-up call now to manage this true existential crisis with this climate change. But yeah, I'm worried. But at the same time, I'm an optimist. And now that we've seen the potential impact of this beast, we can rally the troops and organize our resources accordingly to adapt.
Dr. Raywat Deonandan is an epidemiologist, and he's a prof at the Faculty of Health Sciences in the University of Ottawa. It's just about 15 minutes before midnight, July 1st, Canada Day, in the Eastern Time Zone, where Dr. Deonandan is. And to everyone in the Eastern Time Zone, let me be the first to wish you a happy Canada Day. It's all coming up in just a few minutes from right now. By the way, there will be a Canada Day show tomorrow there will be a live show tomorrow. I'm going for my second shot on July 2nd on Friday. So I thought we had a choice, either do a live show tomorrow or Friday. I have no idea what kind of shape I'll be in Friday because I'll have my second shot. And so I thought the best thing we could do is do the show tomorrow and to do it live, and then we'll have a best of show on Friday. Dr. Deonandan and yours truly talking about AstraZeneca, the latest move from the European Union, which will make it difficult for some Canadians to travel, those Canadians who have AstraZeneca. And then, of course, there's also another wrinkle on safety and a new warning. So those are the issues that we'll be talking about in just a few moments. Are we prepared mentally to get back to normal post-pandemic? That's something we'll be talking about in about 10 minutes with a licensed psychologist, a question I never thought I'd ask. As a matter of fact, let me just start by asking Dr. Deonandan the question. He's an epidemiologist. Dr. Deonandan, are some people going to have trouble getting back to normal, do you think?
I think so. I think some people can't get the fear out of their minds, the fear of other people, the fear of invisible disease. And some people have gotten used to staying inside. Like, I don't know if I can go back to normal, frankly. In the past year, I've had a baby and have transitioned all my activities to working from home. It'll be strange going back to my office. But I think for the most part, most people are very eager to get back to pre-pandemic life. And it'll happen.
You had a baby. I think we're making news right.
Well, my wife had a baby. I watched, but yeah.
Just, we've got so many people who listen literally, and that's why I've got to do a follow-up when you say something like that, because I don't want people out there saying, Chuck had a guy on who claims he had a baby. What kind of a show is Chuck doing? All right, let's talk about AstraZeneca. There's an issue around one of the side effects, but before we do that, the European Union is now going to be handing out, for all intents and purposes, vaccination passports, and people who have them, people who can prove that they've tested negative, people who can prove that they've been double vaccinated are going to get much more access to travel than other people. But one of the wrinkles here is the European Union will not want people who got the AstraZeneca that is actually made in India, which is the kind of AstraZeneca we've got in this country. They don't want to allow those particular people to travel. Do you have any take on that? Is there a difference between AstraZeneca that is assembled in Europe as opposed to AstraZeneca that's assembled in India?
Biologically, there shouldn't be. There should be identical products. They've just gone through different quality control processes. That's why there's an administrative distinction between the two. Therefore, they have different brand names. One is Covishield, the Indian one, and the one in Europe is called AstraZeneca. So I suspect this will be ironed out by the administrators before too long. There's an effort being made by the Serum Institute, who's the manufacturer in India, to get through this red tape. And the kind of vaccination documentation that Canada provides is really the second dose. On the documentation, it's what was your second dose and are you fully vaccinated? So for those people who got AstraZeneca as their first dose and Pfizer or Moderna as their second dose, all you'll see is the mRNA vaccine plus the note that this person is fully vaccinated. We're talking here about those people in Canada who just got AstraZeneca as both their doses. And I do anticipate that eventually the Covishield, the Indian brand, will make it over the wire by European regulators. So I wouldn't be too concerned about this.
So, Doctor, we've got a couple of minutes left here, and I will call you a doctor because you are a PhD, and the university can call you a doctor. So can I? But I just want people to know we're not talking to a medical doctor here. We're talking to a scientist who happens to be one of the top epidemiologists in the country. Capillary leak syndrome connected to AstraZeneca. Should we worry?
Well, it is a very rare condition, and what it is, it's when fluids leak from the small blood vessels, the capillaries, results in some limb swelling, can lower your blood pressure, can thicken your blood, and so forth. It can be quite serious. I think there's one case detected in Canada so far, so exceptionally rare. The Europeans are yet to determine whether it is causally linked to the vaccine, but we can probably assume that it is because Health Canada has gone ahead and issued that warning. But since no one's really getting sick anymore in Canada, I don't think it's that much of a thing to worry about here. But for those people with a history of blood vessel issues and those who also received AstraZeneca, they might want to speak to their doctors. Otherwise, exceptionally rare.
So, what did you make of the study that came out of the UK, which said that not only is mRNA just a fabulous vaccine, so whether it's Pfizer, Moderna, the mRNA vaccines, uh, we may not even need booster shots. They may give us immunity, and I saw this with my own eyes, immunity for life. What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's inspiring, right? Some optimism finally. It's possible. No one knows how long immunity will last. Life is a bit of a stretch for me. Years, I think, are definitely in the cards. But the boosters are not just about prolonging immunity. Boosters might just be to fine-tune your system against new variants. So the flu vaccine we get every year is what we call a multivalent vaccine. It contains protection against a variety of different strains of flu. So it is conceivable that in the future, as little as a year from now, we might recommend a booster against whatever new circulating variants there are. mRNA vaccines are fantastic. They seem to offer a robust, wide kind of immunity against all the circulating variants, but it's a little less potent against some than others. It's conceivable that a new variant might arise that challenges our immunity somewhat, in which case we'll need boosters. But let's take the win. What it means is we may not need to push the booster into as many people as we previously would have thought.
Dr. Deonandan, it is just about 3 minutes before midnight where you are. I want you and your family to have a happy Canada Day, and I'll let you go back now to the baby you just had.
Thank you so much, sir. It's a pleasure as always.
Dr. Raywat Deonandan, Raywat, and then Deonandan, Deonandan, for those people who want to Google him and find out much more about what this incredible epidemiologist has been doing. In a moment,